The galaxy had grown quiet after the chaos of the silent stars. The Kareth fleet, once feared across countless sectors, had retreated to lick their wounds, confused and humbled. Their commanders would remember the strange tactics for generations, though whether they would learn from them remained uncertain. For the Coalition, it was a victory like no other, not achieved by numbers or power, but by courage, creativity, and human ingenuity. And at the center of it all stood Elias Kane, the man who reminded the galaxy what it meant to be human. The celestial tide floated near the Coalition capital system. Stars shimmered in the distance, casting pale light over the fleet as ships returned from the front. Many carried small damage, dented hulls, scratched panels, but their crews were alive and proud. Admiral Torvek stood on the bridge, watching as reports came in. Planets that had feared invasion now had breathing space. Colonies had survived. For the first time in decades, hope had returned. Elias stood beside him, quietly observing the reports. He did not boast, did not celebrate loudly. Instead, he smiled faintly at the displays, seeing the fruits of careful strategy and careful trust. "Do you understand?" Torvek asked. "This was more than a battle. You changed the way we fight, the way we think." Elias nodded slowly. "I only showed you what humans always knew. Rules are only important if you follow them blindly. Imagination, courage, and flexibility. Those are what make victory possible." Torvek tilted his head thoughtfully. "And you call this human ingenuity?" Elias smiled. "Yes, and it works every time because the universe never expects it." Word of the victory spread quickly. Across the Coalition, fleets that had once been hesitant now trained with renewed confidence. Ships moved not just by orders but by understanding, trusting their pilots, officers, and intuition. The Kareth, though still powerful, had learned that prediction alone could not ensure victory. On Venera 9, word reached small settlements and isolated colonies that a human had returned. Tales grew quickly, and in every port and every city the same story was whispered. The human fought with us, and he changed everything. Even young recruits who had never seen humanity in action were inspired. They trained harder, learned faster, and discovered the power of innovation in battle. Elias's lessons spread like wildfire, not only in tactics but in spirit. A week after the battle, Elias and Torvek held a council with the Coalition leaders. The room was filled with species of all shapes and sizes, Thalnari, Vexari, Cerulans, and many others who had once doubted the human ways. Torvek opened the meeting. "Thanks to Elias Kane, we have survived what seemed impossible. And thanks to all of you, we have learned to fight differently, to think differently, and to believe again." Elias stepped forward. "I did not do this alone. You did it. Every officer who trusted their instincts, every pilot who took a risk, every engineer who tried something new. That is what won this battle. Humans are not special because we fight harder. We are special because we dare to imagine the impossible. And now so are you." There were nods, whispers, and soft applause. The alien leaders had never heard words like this before. Words not about strength, or power, or domination, but about hope, creativity, and courage. The Coalition fleet returned to the core systems carrying news of the victory. Colonies celebrated. Ships glided through the stars like migrating flocks, and children looked to the sky with new dreams. Every species began to see that survival was not only about weapons or technology. It was about determination, creativity, and the courage to act when everything seemed lost. Torvek and Elias stood on the bridge of the celestial tide, watching the stars. "The Kareth will come back," Torvek said quietly. "And next time they may be stronger." Elias turned, his eyes steady. "Then we'll be smarter. Humans have always been underestimated, and every time that happens we find a way to turn it around. You've seen that today." The Admiral nodded slowly. They laughed in triumph once, but they will never do so again. In the following months, the Coalition implemented Elias's methods across every fleet. Strategic unpredictability, creative defenses, and encouragement of initiative became standard. Ships were redesigned for flexibility, officers were trained to trust instincts, and every pilot learned that even in chaos, courage could create order. The Kareth, meanwhile, learned the hard way that rules and logic alone could not secure victory. Their commanders debated endlessly, frustrated by the human-led tactics that had destroyed their once unshakable advantage. Tales of human ingenuity traveled across enemy ranks, spreading fear as well as respect. Even in defeat, the Kareth recognized that something had changed. A single human, a forgotten legend, had reminded the galaxy that creativity, adaptability, and courage could defeat even the greatest power. Back on Venera 9, Elias walked among the ruins of his small workshop. Children of various species approached him, wide-eyed and curious. "Are you really a human?" one asked. Elias smiled gently. "Yes," he said. "And if humans can survive and do great things, so can you. You only need courage and imagination." He handed a small repaired drone to the child. "Learn to fix it, improve it, change it. That is how humans survive. By making things better, by daring to imagine more than anyone else." The children nodded eagerly, their minds already spinning with possibilities. For them, the galaxy had become not a place of fear but of adventure. Elias's influence spread further. Across the coalition worlds, officers wrote manuals inspired by his teachings, engineers designed new systems based on his ideas, and leaders encouraged innovation over blind obedience. Human creativity had rekindled a spirit in the galaxy, a spirit that had long been dormant under fear and routine. Torvek observed the changes with quiet satisfaction. "You have done more than win a battle," he said to Elias one evening. "You have reminded the galaxy of itself. You have restored hope." Elias shrugged lightly. "I only reminded them what they forgot. Humans are not special because we win. We're special because we try even when the odds are impossible. And anyone can do that, including you." The Thalnari admiral looked out at the stars, the fleet moving like silver constellations in the night. "I see that now," he said. "And it is a powerful lesson indeed." Months later, the coalition was stronger than it had been in decades. Planets once abandoned were rebuilt. Fleets were modernized with new adaptable designs, and children across worlds dreamed of exploring the stars and creating wonders. The Kreth Dominion remained a threat, but no longer invincible. They knew that the galaxy had learned a new kind of power, the unpredictable strength of humanity. One human had reminded billions that courage, ingenuity, and imagination were as powerful as fleets or weapons. In the end, the galaxy remembered not the numbers, or the technology, or the might of armies. It remembered the human who had returned from silence to inspire hope. Elias Kane, whose ideas, courage, and spirit had changed the course of history. Torvek stood beside him on the observation deck one last time. "What will you do now?" he asked. Elias smiled softly. "I will continue to remind people what they can do. I will teach, I will inspire, and I will create. And when the galaxy faces darkness again, I will be ready. Humans always are." Torvek nodded, understanding at last. "The galaxy will never forget this day, or your lesson." Elias looked out into the stars. "No," he said. "And neither will they forget what it means to fight with heart, mind, and imagination. That is the true power of humanity." The stars glimmered beyond, quiet and eternal. Somewhere, far across space, the Kareth would remember the human who had outwitted them. But for now, the galaxy was alive with hope, courage, and the shining example of what one human could do. A legend had returned, not as a conqueror, but as a reminder that humanity's true strength was not in dominance, but in daring to dream, to imagine, and to inspire others to greatness. And in every corner of the galaxy, from the largest capital worlds to the smallest outposts, that lesson would live forever. For hundreds of years, the Galactic Alliance had lived in peace. Dozens of intelligent species worked together, shared their science, built shining cities on floating worlds, and explored the stars with pride. The Alliance believed they had reached the highest point of civilization. There were no wars, no hunger, no major threats. Every species trusted that their unity made them strong, but peace is fragile. It can break easily when something unexpected enters the universe. That something came from the far edge of the galaxy, the Zir Dominion. No one knew where they came from. Their ships appeared suddenly, their designs unfamiliar, their intentions unclear. At first, the Alliance tried to talk with them, sending messages of peace and welcome. But the Zir did not respond. They only advanced. Their fleets moved with strange precision. Their technology seemed even more advanced than the Alliance's. Worlds that had stood safe for centuries were surrounded in days. Defense stations failed. Communications were jammed. The Zir never spoke, never explained. never answered the desperate calls for discussion. They simply continued forward, and one by one the proud worlds of the Alliance fell silent. Soon panic spread across the stars. The once confident leaders began to argue. Each blamed the other for not preparing sooner. The mighty fleets that had once been symbols of safety were now scattered and afraid. On the moon world of DEATHWORLD, the High Council of the Galactic Alliance gathered in their grand chamber, a vast circular hall made of glass and black stone. Around a shining table sat the representatives of 12 great species. Holograms of lost worlds flickered behind them, each one dimmed to gray, reminders of what had already been taken. The air was heavy with worry. No one spoke for several minutes. The silence itself felt like defeat. At last, High Strategist Kale of the Drawl species broke the silence. The Drawl were tall, with scales that shimmered like bronze under the lights. Kale's voice was calm, but behind his composure there was exhaustion. "Our outer colonies have fallen," Kale said. "The Zir advance has reached the third sector. Our fleets are losing coordination. We must face the truth. We are running out of time." Across the table, Ambassador Vora of the Varnak species lifted his heavy head. His kind were strong and proud, known for their discipline and battle experience. "We are not beaten yet," Vora said firmly. "We simply need a new plan." Kale turned his gaze toward him. "A new plan, yes. But we have tried every logical strategy, every model, every formation. The Zir read us like a book. They know our patterns before we act." The Saren representative, a translucent being made of shimmering light, spoke softly. "Perhaps we need to think beyond logic." The others looked at her in surprise. "Beyond logic?" one asked. "What could be beyond that?" The Saren's glow dimmed slightly as if embarrassed. "Something unpredictable. Something less structured." Kale's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "There is one species in the Alliance known for unpredictability." All eyes turned toward the empty seat at the far end of the table. It bore the symbol of a small blue planet. "Earth. The humans," Kale said. A quiet murmur spread around the table. "Impossible," said a quarry elder. "They are too young, too reckless. They have not even joined our central fleets." "They think differently," Kale replied. "They improvise. They make decisions without overthinking. When faced with problems, they don't rely on logic alone. They rely on instinct." Ambassador Vora frowned. "Instinct does not win wars." Kale leaned forward. "It might if logic keeps failing." There was silence again. The idea sounded absurd. To trust the fate of the galaxy to one of the youngest, least advanced species in the Alliance. But the truth was clear to everyone sitting there. No one else had a solution. Finally, the Saren representative nodded slowly. "Desperate times demand unconventional allies." Kale rose from his seat. "Then it is settled. We will request human assistance, but who?" asked another council member. "Their world has many, and they are not united even among themselves." Kale turned toward the glowing display beside him. A human's face appeared. Rough features, a calm but sharp expression, eyes that seemed to see through the screen. "Captain Elias Rourke," Kale said. "He served during the border conflicts on Earth before they joined the Alliance. His record is full of strange victories, ones that made no sense yet always worked. The humans called him the Wild Strategist." Several council members exchanged uneasy looks. "A man who wins through chaos?" one whispered. "You would trust him with our survival?" Kyle's bronze eyes glinted. "He is not perfect, but perfection has brought us nothing. It's time to try imperfection." The council debated for hours. Some resisted, saying it was foolish to bring in a primitive species. Others agreed that they had no other choice. At last a vote was taken. The decision passed. By one vote. A small delegation was chosen to travel to Earth immediately. Their mission: find Captain Elias Rourke and convince him to help. Far away on a quiet coast under a blue sky, Elias Rourke was living a peaceful life. His house stood near the sea, surrounded by wild grass and the sound of waves. He had served his time in command, led his share of missions, and chosen retirement over glory. He enjoyed fixing old boats, fishing at dawn, and pretending the universe was calm. But the universe had other plans. On a cool morning, a strange hum filled the air. The sky shimmered as a ship descended, sleek and silver, nothing human-made. Rourke dropped his tools and stared as the craft landed softly on the beach. Its ramp opened and two tall Drawl officers stepped out. Their armor gleamed like mirrors and their movements were sharp and controlled. "Captain Elias Rourke?" one asked in a voice translated by a small device on his chest. Rourke squinted. "Used to be," he said cautiously. "Who's asking?" The officer extended a data pad. "We come on behalf of the Galactic Alliance. You are requested at once. It's a matter of survival." Rourke blinked. "Survival of what?" The Drawl hesitated. "Of everyone." It was not the kind of sentence one could easily ignore. Within hours, Rourke found himself inside an alien ship, staring out at the stars as the blue curve of Earth shrank behind him. His mind raced with questions. He had known of the Alliance from old transmissions, a collection of advanced species working together, but he had never expected to meet them in person, let alone be summoned by them. The journey was silent except for the hum of the engines. The Drawl avoided small talk, focused on their duties. Rourke simply watched, trying to understand what kind of mess could make such disciplined beings look worried. When the ship finally reached Vetra Prime, Rourke was escorted into a large hall filled with unfamiliar faces. The air shimmered with the glow of different colors, scales, feathers, lights, and forms that defied description. Dozens of eyes turned toward him, studying the lone human who had arrived from a distant, insignificant world. Rourke felt like a mechanic invited into a council of gods. Kale, the Drawl strategist, stepped forward. "Captain Rourke," he began, "thank you for coming. We are facing a crisis unlike any before. Our enemies advance without pause. Every plan we have made, they have countered. We have run out of options." Rourke crossed his arms. "So you're asking me to find one?" Kale nodded. "Yes, we need a human mind. We need your kind of thinking." The human gave a small, uncertain smile. "My kind of thinking, huh? That usually means bad ideas that somehow work." A few council members exchanged confused glances, unsure whether to be insulted or encouraged. Rourke looked at the holographic map in the center of the room. Red lines spread across the galaxy, marking lost systems. The Zir's advance was neat, methodical, like a machine spreading across the stars. "They're not unbeatable," Rourke said after a long silence. "They're just too perfect," Kale frowned. "Perfect?" "Yeah," Rourke said, leaning closer. "They think they can predict everything. Every move, every pattern. But there's one thing logic can't predict." "And what is that?" asked the Saran representative. Rourke's smile widened.
"Chaos. That single word changed the course of the war."
The council didn't yet understand what he meant. But in that moment, for the first time in months, there was something new in the air. Hope. The council chamber was filled with silence after Captain Elias Rourke spoke that one word. Chaos. Dozens of alien eyes stared at him. Some were curious, some doubtful, and a few almost offended. The idea sounded absurd to them. The Galactic Alliance had always valued order, logic, and structure. Chaos was the one thing they avoided in every plan. Kale of the Drawl, however, looked thoughtful. He tapped the table gently with his clawed finger. "Explain," he said at last. Rourke walked toward the glowing star map in the center of the chamber. The holographic lines showed how the Zir fleets had moved. Clean, perfect formations sweeping across the galaxy. It looked beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "Look at that," Rourke said. "Every move they make fits a pattern. Every ship follows a rule. Their logic is flawless, but that's exactly why they can be beaten." "How?" asked the Saran representative, her glowing form flickering softly. Rourke turned to face them. "Because when you fight something predictable, you stop trying to surprise it. You follow rules. You move by numbers. You do what you're supposed to do. But humans," he smiled faintly, "we don't always do what we're supposed to." Some of the council members exchanged puzzled looks. Ambassador Vora grunted. "So you're saying we must act without reason?" "Not exactly," Rourke replied. "You still think, but you act faster than they can calculate. You make mistakes on purpose. You confuse them until they can't tell what's real and what's not. The Zir expect everything to make sense. We'll give them something that doesn't." Kale's bronze eyes gleamed with interest. "An unpredictable strategy." "Exactly," Rourke said. "It's like a storm. You can't predict where lightning will strike, but when it hits, it changes everything." For a long moment, the room was silent again. Then Kale spoke softly. "This might be what we need." Some of the council still disagreed. The quarry elder shook his head. The Alliance does not fight like savages. We have order. Rourke shrugged. How's that order working out for you? That silenced the room. Even Kale hid a small smile. Finally, after long debate, the council voted to test Rourke's ideas. Kale was assigned as his liaison. Together, they would train one fleet, a small group of ships that had already been damaged and nearly disbanded. If Rourke's chaotic method failed, no one important would be lost. If it succeeded, they might have a chance to save the galaxy. The unlikely fleet Rourke's assigned fleet wasn't impressive. It consisted of 12 ships, a mix of Draal, Varnak, Saren, and even 2 human-built cruisers. The crews were tired, discouraged, and unsure why they were chosen. When Rourke arrived at the hangar, the officers straightened uncertainly. He wasn't what they expected. He didn't wear a grand uniform. His jacket was plain, his boots scuffed, and his hair a little messy. He looked more like a worker than a commander. "All right," he said, walking through the hangar with an easy stride. "I know you're wondering why you're here. So am I. But since we're all stuck together, let's make it worth it." The Varnak officer, tall and muscular, stepped forward. "Captain Rourke, the council says you will teach us new tactics. But your files show no experience with galactic warfare." Rourke grinned. "That's the point. The Zir know how you fight. They don't know how I think." He gathered them around a large holographic display and began showing strange patterns, curved movements, random jumps, sudden retreats followed by fast attacks. Nothing looked organized. The alien officers frowned, confused. "This looks chaotic," said a Siren navigator. "Exactly," Rourke said cheerfully. "You'll learn to look chaotic, but every move will have a hidden purpose. The Zir will think you're making mistakes, but those mistakes will lead them into traps." It took weeks of hard training. The crew struggled to unlearn the habits of perfect order. They were used to following precise commands, moving in formation, keeping everything symmetrical. Rourke forced them to do the opposite, to move irregularly, to improvise, to react without waiting for instructions. At first, it was a disaster. Ships collided, timings failed, communications got tangled. The Draal officers complained, the Saren pilots felt frustrated, and the Varnak crews grumbled that it was madness. But slowly, something changed. They began to see patterns in the chaos. They started anticipating each other's moves. They learned to trust instinct. Mistakes became opportunities. The more they practiced, the smoother the confusion looked. Kyle observed from the command platform, fascinated. "He's teaching them to think like humans," he whispered to another officer. "Is that good or bad?" The officer asked. Kale smiled faintly. "We'll find out soon." Testing the plan after a month of training, Rourke told the council they were ready. The council was skeptical, but Kale convinced them to allow a small mission, a test against a minor Zir patrol near the edge of the Luran Nebula. The mission seemed simple. Approach the nebula, disrupt the Zir supply lines, and escape. Most expected it to fail. As the fleet entered the glowing mists of the nebula, the crew's nerves tightened. The Zir ships appeared on scanners, elegant, perfect formations gliding silently through the stars. Rourke gave calm orders. "Let's confuse them. Remember, don't fight their way. Fight ours." The fleet broke into scattered groups, moving unpredictably through the fog. They changed direction without pattern, switched frequencies, and even powered down certain systems to create ghost signals. The Zir tried to track them, but every time they locked onto a target, it vanished or turned into something else. From the control deck, Kale watched in disbelief. "They're losing track of us," Rourke nodded. "Good, keep them guessing." Minutes turned into hours. The Zir ships began moving erratically, reacting to false signals. The fleet slipped behind them, disrupting their communication relays and confusing their sensors. No direct battle took place, yet by the time the Zir withdrew, their patrol network was in disarray. When the Alliance fleet returned home, the Council could hardly believe the report. The Zir had retreated, without understanding what had happened. For the first time in months, the Alliance had won something. Hope and doubt word of the victory spread quickly. Across the Alliance, people began to whisper the human's name. Some called it luck. Others called it genius. Kale called it a new kind of order, but not everyone was pleased. The Quarry Elder confronted Kale in private. "This human plays with chance. One mistake and we will lose everything. Kyle replied calmly. One mistake from the Zir and we will win everything. Isn't that balance? Still, the council remained cautious. They approved more missions but demanded careful supervision. Rourke didn't mind. They'll believe it when they see it, he told Kale with a grin. And they did. Over the next few months, Rourke led several small operations, each more daring than the last. Instead of grand, clean battles, he used deception, confusion, and creativity. The Zir couldn't adapt. Their perfect formations began to crumble under the weight of unpredictability. Each success brought new confidence. The crew started to trust him completely. Even the skeptical Varnak officer admitted, "Your madness works, Captain." Rourke laughed. "It's not madness. It's just human." The human lesson one evening as the fleet drifted in the quiet orbit of a friendly world, Kale found Rourke staring out at the stars. "You've changed them," Kale said. "They think differently now. Even I catch myself planning in your strange, unpredictable way." Rourke smiled softly. "Humans don't plan to be unpredictable. We just accept that the universe doesn't always follow plans. You learn to dance with it instead of against it." Kale considered that for a moment. "Dance with chaos. It sounds poetic," Rourke chuckled. "It's just survival." He looked out at the galaxy beyond. "Your people are smart, Kale. Smarter than we are in most ways. But sometimes when everything goes wrong, the smartest thing to do is stop thinking so hard. Listen to your gut. Do what feels right, even if the numbers say it's wrong." Kyle tilted his head. "And that is the human factor?" Rourke nodded. "That's what makes us unpredictable." The council's surprise. When Rourke and Kale returned to Vetra Prime for a debriefing, the council hall was packed. The once gloomy chamber now buzzed with cautious excitement. Kale presented the results. 3 successful operations, 0 losses, and Zir fleets forced to retreat from 2 sectors. The Saren representative's glow brightened. "Your plan. It truly worked." Rourke shrugged modestly. "It worked this time. The trick is to keep changing, never repeat what they've already seen. Chaos only works when it stays new." The council members nodded slowly. They were finally beginning to understand. Kale turned to Rourke. "The Alliance owes you gratitude. What do you call this strategy?" Rourke smiled. "On Earth, we call it thinking outside the box." The translation devices struggled with the idiom. After a moment of confusion, the council simply laughed, something they hadn't done in a long while. That night, the skies above Vetra Prime were filled with light. For the first time since the war began, the Alliance allowed themselves a small celebration. It wasn't victory yet, but it was hope. And hope, once reborn, is stronger than any fleet. Far above, as the stars glittered quietly, Kale stood beside Rourke on the balcony. "You've given us something we forgot we had," Kale said. "What's that?" Rourke asked. "Faith, not just in logic but in ourselves." Rourke smiled. "Then let's make sure we don't lose it." And as the night deepened over Vetra Prime, the first whispers of a newly. The success of Captain Elias Rourke's missions changed everything for the Galactic Alliance. For the first time in years, the council chambers of Vetra Prime were filled not with fear, but with discussion, laughter, and cautious hope. The members of the Alliance had started to believe again, not only in their fleets but in themselves. Yet hope alone could not win a war. The Zir Dominion was still strong, still spreading across the galaxy like a silent storm. Their fleets continued to move in perfect harmony, their every step cold and logical. And even though Rourke's methods had confused them for a time, the council knew that the Zir would soon adapt. That was what Rourke was counting on. A human's way of thinking. Inside the command room, glowing star maps filled the walls. Kale stood near the central console, analyzing reports from the outer sectors. When Rourke entered carrying a cup of something steaming and dark, Kale turned to him. "The Zir have begun studying our new tactics," Kale said. "They're trying to understand how we move. Soon they may learn to predict it." Rourke smiled slightly. "Then we'll stop being predictable again." Kale frowned. "You mean, change the strategy?" "Not just change it," Rourke replied, setting his cup down. "We reinvent it every time. That's the key. Chaos doesn't stay still." Kyle looked at him for a moment, thoughtful. "Your people. Do you always fight this way?" Rourke chuckled softly. "We don't always fight, Kale, but when we do, we don't follow the same path twice. It's part of who we are. We learn, we adapt, and when we fail, we try again." Kale nodded slowly. That may be what makes humans so dangerous and so inspiring. Rourke smiled. Dangerous isn't the word I'd use, maybe unpredictable. They both looked at the glowing map. Red dots marked the Zir positions. They were closing in on several border systems. The Alliance couldn't afford to lose more ground. We need something big, Kale said. Something that turns the tide completely. Rourke's eyes narrowed as he studied the map. Something big, huh? Then maybe it's time we take the fight to them, in a way they won't see coming. Operation Wildfire. 2 days later, the council gathered in full. The chamber was tense but expectant. Rourke stood at the center with Kale beside him. A large projection of the galaxy rotated slowly behind them. Rourke pointed at the red zones spreading across the hologram. The Zir control these sectors. They've built supply stations here, and here. Every time you fight them, you go head-on. Formation against formation. That's why they always win. You play their game, the Saren representative asked quietly. And your idea is to play a different one? Rourke nodded. We stop trying to match them. We scatter. We turn the entire galaxy into a storm they can't predict. Every ship becomes part of the plan, but no two do the same thing. No central command. No perfect lines. Just fire everywhere, fast, confusing, and impossible to track. He tapped the hologram and the image changed. Instead of neat fleets, hundreds of small signals blinked across the map, moving independently. I call it Operation Wildfire, Rourke said. You can't control a wildfire once it starts. It spreads on its own. The room was silent for several seconds. Finally, Kale spoke. It's bold, risky, untraditional. Rourke smiled faintly. So it might actually work. Some council members were uncertain. The Quarry Elder shook his head. This strategy abandons order. If every ship acts on its own, how do we maintain control? You don't, Rourke said simply. You trust your captains. You let them think for themselves. Give them freedom to react. Teach them to surprise the enemy, not wait for orders. The Saren representative tilted her glowing head. This sounds like chaos given shape. Exactly, Rourke said. It will confuse them, divide them, and make them react instead of plan. Once they start reacting, we've already won. Kyle placed a hand on the table. I support this. We've tried perfection. It failed. Let's try humanity's way. After hours of debate, the council finally agreed. Operation Wildfire was approved. Training the Storm Rourke spent the next several weeks traveling from fleet to fleet. Every planet, every commander, every crew learned a new way of thinking. Instead of long, careful briefings, Rourke's lessons were short and strange. He told stories, gave examples from human history, and shared ideas that made no sense to the logical minds of the Alliance. Sometimes, he said during one session, the smartest thing you can do is look foolish. If they think you made a mistake, they stop preparing for what comes next. He showed them how to improvise, how to trust instinct, how to listen to the rhythm of a battle instead of following a script. Kyle watched as alien officers began to change. The disciplined drawl started smiling more during exercises. The Saren learned to move their light-based ships in unpredictable spirals. Even the Varnak, who were famous for strict formations, began experimenting with flexible tactics. One evening, as the training continued, Kale approached Rourke on the observation deck. You've done something I thought was impossible, he said quietly. You've made us believe that disorder can have purpose. Rourke smiled. Disorder is just another kind of order, one that adapts faster. Kale nodded slowly. Then the galaxy is about to learn what that means. The first strike. The first mission of Operation Wildfire began quietly. Small fleets slipped into different sectors, each with a unique plan. One team would distract, another would send false signals. Others would strike key locations, not to destroy them, but to confuse the Zir sensors and systems. The Zir command received hundreds of scattered reports, attacks from nowhere, signals that appeared and vanished, ships that seemed to multiply and disappear. Their perfect logic systems could not process the chaos. Kale's fleet, under Rourke's direction, led one of the key diversions. As their ships jumped between star systems in irregular patterns, Kale turned to Rourke on the bridge. They're scattering their fleets. It's working, Rourke nodded. Good, don't hit them hard, just keep them guessing, make them think we're everywhere. All across the galaxy, the Zir formations began to crumble. Their fleets started chasing shadows. Their communication networks became clogged with conflicting data. When the Alliance regrouped days later, they had achieved what no one thought possible. They had pushed the Zir back for the first time since the war began. The council chambers on Vetra Prime erupted in joy. Reports came in from every sector: victories, rescues, and newly liberated colonies. Kale turned to Rourke during the final debrief. "Your chaos worked again." Rourke smiled tiredly. "Chaos only works until they understand it. Then we have to find a new kind." Kale blinked. "You already plan to change it?" "Always," Rourke said simply. "That's what keeps us human." Doubt among hope. Despite the success, not everyone was convinced. Some members of the council grew nervous about giving so much freedom to the fleets. "What if captains make the wrong choices?" one asked. "What if the chaos turns against us?" Kale defended Rourke. "Our strength now comes from trust. If we take that away, we return to the same failure as before." Rourke, meanwhile, didn't argue. He just kept working. He studied Zir transmissions, patterns, and movements. Slowly, he noticed something strange. Their signals were becoming less organized. Their responses delayed. Their structure weakening. "They're confused," he said to Kale one night. "They're trying to learn what chaos means, but their logic won't let them." Kale looked thoughtful. "Then they're fighting a war they can't understand." "Exactly," Rourke said. "And that's the kind of war we can win." The next step weeks passed. The Alliance continued to push forward. Rourke became a familiar name across hundreds of systems. Alien children played games pretending to be the human captain. The people once afraid now stood tall again, but Rourke wasn't satisfied. He looked at the stars each night, knowing the Zir were still out there, still planning, still waiting. One morning, he entered Kale's office with a new idea. "It's time to end this," he said simply. Kale looked up, surprised. "End it? We're just beginning to win." Rourke leaned over the table and activated the star map. A single red point appeared in the center of the galaxy. "That's their command core. The place that controls everything. Their fleets, their communication, their strategy. If we hit that, we break their logic completely." Kale's eyes widened. "That's impossible. It's too deep." "No one has ever reached it," Rourke smiled. "No one ever tried the human way." Kyle hesitated, then slowly nodded. "You already have a plan, don't you?" Rourke's grin widened. "Not yet. But give me a day or two and I'll come up with one that doesn't make sense." Kyle laughed softly. "You mean another plan of chaos?" "Exactly," Rourke said. "The Zir have celebrated too soon. It's time to show them what humanity really means." That night, as the stars shimmered over Vetra Prime, Rourke sat alone in the command center, sketching patterns on a digital pad. They looked random. Loops, lines, arrows, circles. But behind that randomness was something more powerful. The imagination of a human mind that refused to give up. The next phase of the war was about to begin. And this time it wouldn't just be about survival. It would be about proving that in a galaxy ruled by logic, sometimes the greatest strength comes from a spark of chaos, and the heart of humanity. The galaxy had begun to whisper a name. Elias Rourke, the human who taught the Alliance to think differently. The small victories of Operation Wildfire had become a symbol of hope for countless worlds. Yet Rourke knew the war was far from over. The Zir Dominion still controlled the heart of the galaxy, and as long as they held the command core, no system was truly safe. Rourke stood in the command room aboard the flagship Aurora, staring at the star map glowing in front of him. Red zones marked Zir control. Small blips showed scattered Alliance fleets, each moving in unpredictable patterns he had trained them to use. Kyle approached, his bronze scales reflecting the soft light of the room. "We've done well," Kale said. "Even the council admits it. Yet you look..." Restless. Rourke didn't turn. "Because the war isn't over. We've slowed them, confused them, even pushed them back in some sectors, but they still have their core. That's where they think, where they control everything. Take that and the galaxy's ours." Kale frowned. "It's impossible. No one has ever reached the core. Their fleets guard it it's like a fortress." Rourke grinned faintly. "That's why we won't go straight. We won't fight them their way. We'll fight their way of thinking instead." Preparing the final storm, Rourke called a meeting with the fleet captains. They were a diverse group: Drawl, Varnak, Saren, and even humans who had joined Alliance forces. The room was tense, but excitement ran through the air. Everyone knew the next mission would decide the fate of the galaxy. Rourke's voice cut through the nervous chatter. Listen, we don't have to destroy everything in our path. Our goal isn't power or glory. Our goal is their logic. They think they can predict us, but we're going to prove they can't. A Varnak officer raised a hand. But Captain Rourke, the Zyre Corps is heavily defended. Any attempt will be met with overwhelming force. Rourke nodded. Exactly. So we won't attack directly. We'll split into multiple groups. Each one will act differently. Some create diversions, some disrupt communications, some sneak into key positions. Nothing is planned in detail. The key is unpredictability. The captains exchanged nervous looks. It sounded risky, even reckless, but Rourke's confidence was contagious. We're going to hit them like a storm, Rourke continued. They won't know where we'll appear, when we'll strike, or how we'll act. Every ship becomes a piece of the plan, but each piece thinks for itself. Trust your instincts. Trust each other. Trust chaos. Into the heart of the Zyre. The fleets moved into position silently. Rourke's strategy relied on timing, intuition, and flexibility. Ships dispersed across hundreds of systems, sending false signals and breaking patterns. The Zyre fleets tried to respond but were already overwhelmed. Every time they adjusted, the Alliance did something unexpected elsewhere. Rourke's small fleet led the operation, moving deep into the Zyre-controlled space. The Zyre formations were perfectly aligned, as if their machines could anticipate every move. Yet for the first time, they were facing something they could not calculate. On the bridge of the Aurora, Rourke watched the holographic map. Red dots flickered and moved, showing Zyre ships attempting to track them. They're reacting too slowly, he said quietly. They've never seen anything like this. Kyle leaned closer. They're losing coordination. Your method, it's working, Rourke's eyes gleamed. Good, now we push further. The core isn't just a location. It's their mind. We need to make them doubt every thought they have. If they hesitate, we win without firing a single shot. Unpredictable moves. Rourke divided his fleet into 4 main groups. The diversion fleet, pretending to attack minor sectors, drawing Zyre ships away from the core. The saboteurs, small fast ships entering hidden pathways to disrupt communications. The shadow fleet, larger ships moving silently, invisible on sensors, ready to strike where least expected. The lightning fleet, led by Rourke himself, unpredictable and fast, designed to confuse and mislead. Each group operated independently. No 2 crews moved the same way. Signals bounced in all directions. Zyre commanders struggled to understand what was real and what was false. From the bridge, Kale whispered, "They're falling apart. Their patterns. They can't keep up," Rourke smiled. Exactly. Let's keep them dancing. Hours passed. Zyre fleets became scattered, chasing imaginary targets, responding to signals that didn't exist. Every attempt to coordinate resulted in more confusion. What had once been a precise machine was now a tangled web of indecision. Rourke's strategy was simple. Confusion first, disruption second, and finally, a precise strike at the heart. The core revealed after days of careful movement. The Zyre core finally came into view, a massive structure of black alloy, surrounded by defensive ships and protective fields. The core pulsed with energy, controlling fleets across sectors like a central brain. Rourke stood on the bridge, his crew tense but focused. "This is it," he said. "All of our chaos leads here. Everyone knows their role, but don't follow a script. Make your own decisions, adapt, change, surprise them." Kyle studied the map. "Even so, it's heavily guarded. Any mistake?" Rourke interrupted him. "No mistakes. Only opportunities." With a deep breath, the fleets moved into position. They didn't fly in straight lines or formations. They zigzagged, split, disappeared, and reappeared. The Zyre core defenses tried to respond but misread every movement. Missiles and energy fields were wasted on empty space. Sensors tracked shadows. The real ship slipped through undetected. The spark of humanity as they closed in, Rourke turned to Kale. "Watch this. The Zyre rely on perfection. They think a single wrong move is impossible, so we make many wrong moves at once. They executed maneuvers no one had attempted before. Ships feigned retreats, split into multiple trajectories, then regrouped in unexpected positions. Every diversion forced the Zyre to split their attention. Every misstep appeared to be a mistake, yet each one was intentional. The council watching remotely could hardly believe it. Even the most skeptical members whispered in awe. The Zyre fleets, despite their superior numbers and advanced technology, were being outsmarted. not by brute force but by unpredictability. Rourke smiled faintly. Sometimes being human is about seeing what logic can't, and that's where we shine. Breaking the Zir mind as the fleets reached the core, the Zir began to panic. Their systems sent contradictory commands. Ships collided with imaginary targets. Energy shields fluctuated wildly. The central core pulsed in confusion, unable to process the chaos surrounding it. Rourke's lightning fleet executed the final move. Small ships penetrated the perimeter and created a feedback loop within the core's systems. Energy fields bounced off each other, signals tangled and twisted, and the Zir core's control over the fleets collapsed. It was a victory not measured in destruction but in control, or rather, the lack of it. The Zir could no longer command their forces. Perfect logic had failed. From the bridge of the Aurora, Rourke turned to Kale. See? Chaos isn't destruction. It's freedom. Freedom from the patterns that bind you. And the Zir are trapped in patterns. Kale nodded, awe in his eyes. You've done what we never thought possible. You've broken them without breaking them. Celebration and reflection. The fleets returned to friendly space. Systems liberated themselves as Zir ships, now directionless, fled or surrendered. Across the Alliance, hope surged stronger than ever. The Council convened a special meeting. Rourke was honored not with titles or medals, but with respect, trust, and recognition for the mind he had shared with the galaxy. Kyle addressed the assembly. The human captain has reminded us that victory is not only in numbers or technology, but in the heart, creativity, and unpredictability of a single mind. Today we have learned the true power of humanity. Rourke smiled quietly, watching the council members nod in agreement. He had not sought glory. He had sought only to show the Alliance what humans could bring, the spark of imagination, courage, and instinct. A new beginning that night. Rourke looked at the stars from the balcony of Vetra Prime. The galaxy was still vast and threats might return someday. But for now, the Alliance had won not through sheer power, but through thinking differently, the human way. Kale joined him. You've given the Alliance a new kind of hope. Rourke nodded. The galaxy didn't just need strategy. It needed a reminder that sometimes survival comes from trusting yourself, trusting others, and trusting the unpredictable. The stars twinkled silently, as if agreeing, and so the legend of the human captain spread, not as a warrior, but as a mind that changed the galaxy.